Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shelly and I am so glad that you are here. So what are we doing today? Today I am wrapping up everything that I read. I'm going to be talking about everything that I read in February. I read 9 books in February, and surprisingly there are going to be 4 books that I actually can't say anything about because I read them for the Booktube Prize. If you don't know what the Booktube Prize is, it is a wonderful, the pinnacle of literary prizes, because it is here, ran on Booktube, mostly by Robert from A Barter Hordes. He helps organize the Booktube Prize. And basically what it is that we judges, I am a judge for nonfiction. There are fiction, nonfiction, and translated fiction. I am a judge for nonfiction, and I was tasked to read 6 nonfiction books in the course of 2 months and judge them. And so I can't talk about the 4 I've already read because I don't want to influence, well, the first rule of the Booktube Prize is you can't talk about the Booktube Prize, and I don't want to influence anybody else who might have these books now or later on in their judging, even though I do have opinions about them. So if you are new here, then hi, welcome, I'm Shelly, and if you are not here, then hi, welcome back. And instead of talking about every single individual book that I read, I'm mostly going to be talking about trends that I'm seeing in my reading. So I am a mood reader. I pick up books based on my mood. I also am a big planner and a big buddy reader. So with all of those factors in mind, it kind of ends up being kind of interesting what shakes out with my reading over the course of a couple months. Not just looking at my own reading, but I want you to look back on your own reading if you feel so inspired, and tell me if you see trends in your reading, because that would be really, really interesting. And when I say trends, I'm looking mostly at the books that I read in January and February, and maybe coming up with some conclusions about me as a reader as I look at the trends that have emerged from my observations. And then also I thought, you know, maybe I don't know what else I thought. I lost the thought. The thought is lost. Oh, my thought came back to me. You can find out what's currently trending in your reading by just looking at the last 20 books that you read, the last 15 books that you read. You can look at the last 6 months. I, again, am going to be looking at about the last 2 months and then stretching a little bit further if I need to, in order to explain why I see that as a trend in my reading. Okay, are we clear as mud? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, let's get started. Before we get started, if you like these kinds of videos about books and reading and making observations about one's reading, or if you just like hanging out, I would love for you to stick around and subscribe. Would love to have you here. Okay, so what's trending in my reading? Let's find out. Observation number 1, nonfiction addiction. So of the 16 or 17 books that I've read already this year, I have read 7 nonfiction books. And 4 of those nonfiction books I cannot talk about. And that would be this stack right here. This stack right here. Or on my screen, it would be the block, like the right side screen block of books. So we have The Codebreaker by Walter Isaacson. We have The Sinner and the Saint by Kevin Birmingham. The Doctor's Blackwell by Janice P. Nomura. And Facing the Mountain by Daniel James Brown. Again, these are all Booktube Prize books, so I can't really comment on what I thought about them or anything like that. But I will say that I read 3 out of 4 of the books with a friend and subscriber, Deb Johnson, and it was really awesome to have somebody reading these nonfiction books with me. She's a nonfiction reader, mostly, and just being able to bounce ideas off of someone else who really loves nonfiction. The history of my nonfiction reading is this. I read about 25% nonfiction if I was left up to my own devices. But before 2021, I was in school. I was in graduate school for a couple of years, and I was a teacher before that. And so a lot of my nonfiction reading had to do with the curriculum that I was teaching or the curriculum that I was learning for my graduate school program. And so I did read, I read just a ton of nonfiction, but it wasn't necessarily, you know, popular or new releases. There were more like journal articles, or, you know, an article I was going to read with my students that afternoon or the following day, and then, you know, taking notes on it. So the reading was quite different, but there was something really nice and familiar diving back into the nonfiction world and picking up these books because it felt like seeing an old friend, like in a genre, I suppose. And I'm really glad to have gotten back into my nonfiction reading. And I also am really loving the process of the Booktube Prize judging. I love this idea that I was given 6 books. I was tasked to read 6 books and judge them, rank them, figure them out, think a little bit more critically and deeply about them in a specific time frame. It feels like a task a student would have to do, but I'm not a student. I loved being a student, if you couldn't tell, and now just revisiting nonfiction books it feels really good and warms my heart in some way. Let me know if you're a nonfiction reader. So other than my Booktube Prize books, I read Hiroshima by John Hersey. I have a whole review dedicated to that, which I'll leave down below. I read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, which I thought was brilliant. And I read Virginia Woolf, which I will touch on in a minute. I read A Room of One's Own. But yeah, nonfiction addiction. I feel like I'm reading just a ton of nonfiction these days. Okay, observation number 2, Second Date. So there are a lot of authors that I have read a second book from them, and that's why I'm calling this Second Date. The first author that pops up, I read both of her books this month. All of the books that I've read from her I've read this month, and that would be Toni Morrison. The first book I read was The Bluest Eye. The Bluest Eye mostly follows the story of a young girl named Piccola who is pregnant. It makes that very clear, and through the story you realize that Piccola is obsessed with standards of beauty. She thinks that having blue eyes, this idea that she got from Shirley Temple, that if you had blue eyes you would be beautiful, and that broke my heart. That concept really broke my heart. The story is really about Piccola's trauma and her as a person and why she is pregnant at this really young age, and it follows her story. I was glad to be introduced to Morrison in this way because I realized that Toni Morrison is an incredibly character-driven writer. She likes to make the reader work for what they're reading. She does a lot of her writing in a non-linear way, at least from the 2 books that I read from her. And of the 2 books that I read from her, The Bluest Eye was an easier read, but for me, a less satisfying one. The Bluest Eye was written and published in 1970, and Beloved was published in 1987. This won the Pulitzer Prize in 1988. Beloved was a more confusing read. There was a lot more pieces to put together. There were a lot more main characters that you were focusing on as a reader. But I found the story of Beloved to work a lot better. Beloved is essentially a ghost story set right around the Civil War. So you're getting kind of this one foot in slavery, a world where there is slavery, and one foot where slavery is no more, technically speaking. And you are following mostly a slave woman named Setha, and you're really getting her experience and what she's lived through and the trauma that she's lived through and what it would be like to live as a slave woman during this time period in the United States. And I thought that the techniques of Toni Morrison's strengths, so non-linear storylines, having to piece together and puzzle out what she's talking about, and telling a story that is mostly character driven, and also having magical elements in it. She has magical elements of magical realism in both books, but for whatever reason I had a lot more empathy for the main character of Setha. I felt like I could see where she was coming from and the decisions that she made, even though I didn't agree with them. I definitely walked away with like a touch more empathy in Beloved than I did with The Bluest Eye. The Bluest Eye really just, the only thing I can compare The Bluest Eye to is just having like a pit, a small rock in my stomach that won't move because of the immense grief that I feel after reading The Bluest Eye. The grief, that type of grief, that profound sadness, for whatever reason, doesn't exist for me in Beloved. And the more nuance of emotion is what, for me, brings Beloved up higher. So Toni Morrison, I'm gonna stop rambling about her. If you all are like, Shelly, we want to know more about your thoughts, just ask and I'll think about doing a single book review down below. I didn't mention, but I read this with Sonja Devenney and Elle from the channel Elle Thinks. Sonja is a friend and subscriber, and Elle, she makes videos here on YouTube, so I will leave her channel linked down below. Okay, the next second date, which I'll be a little more brief about, would be Virginia Woolf. So I read Mrs. Dalloway, I think it was in October of 2021. I really loved it. And then I also read A Room of One's Own, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So the premise of A Room of One's Own is that Virginia Woolf is asked to speak at a female college, or she's asked to speak to females about women in fiction, and she basically takes you through her thought process of what is women, what is fiction, and what is how can we get to a place where women are in a position to be able to write more fiction. And her hypothesis, Woolf's hypothesis, is that if we have women, we have a space of our own and a little bit of our own money, then we are able to be in a position where we can write fiction on more of an equal footing as men. And she goes through all of her thinking on this, and she talks about, really, it's not an argument against men, it's more about an argument for women in regards to how we need our own space and our own money in order to be writers. Her thought process is crystal clear, beautiful to read. I mean, just like, it is like being inside the mind of a genius and then like walking outside of the mind of a genius and feeling quite changed. That's how I felt about A Room of One's Own. All right, my second date, which I've also already talked about, was James Baldwin for this year. I read Giovanni's Room as my first book for the year, and I'm so glad that I did, because I thought it was so well done, so emotional, so thought-provoking. It is a love story about a young man who doesn't really accept himself as gay, and he is fighting with he's fighting with his internal self about his love for another man. So that's what Giovanni's Room is essentially about. And then The Fire Next Time is an essay about blackness in America and the position that black men and women have been in the United States, and what that might the result might be, what an outcome might be. And you see James Baldwin in this very preacherly voice talking about the consequences of putting people enslaved for so long, and what the results might end up, the outcome might end up being, which was really interesting. I felt like he wrote from a lot of love, but a lot of firmness. The whole thing was wonderful. James Baldwin. I can't speak highly enough of him. All right, observation number 3. Once Upon a Genre is what I'm calling it, and it is going to be historical fiction. I have read 4 historical fiction books this month, which is strange for me, because I didn't realize that I liked historical fiction as much as I do. So I read Gone with the Wind. I will link my very, very long review, which I was going to say every single thought I ever thought of Gone with the Wind is in that review, but I decided not to title it that obnoxiously long title. But I read Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I also read, as a historical fiction piece, Beloved by Toni Morrison. I read Outlander, Diana Gabaldon. This is another historical fiction, sci-fi kind of book that I read this year. And then finally, I read The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. All right, observation number 4 is going to be theories, series, and queries, which is mostly the fact that I read a whole series of books, which is not really like me. I'm not much of a series reader, but I did finish The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, which is her 3rd book in the Thomas Cromwell series, which I have right here. I finished this series, and I am really pleased both to be done with it and really proud of myself that I finished the whole series. Here it is. I don't think these books actually match, though they're all from Picador. I don't think they're all in the same set, but we're not worried about that. I will say that The Mirror and the Light, I do want to do a full dedicated review on all 3 of these books of Hilary Mantel's the Thomas Cromwell series. I will say that this book comes in at about 750 pages, and for the first 600 pages, it is quite slow. Now, I am a huge fan of Mantel's writing. I really love the way that she approached the subject and the style that she was able to maintain throughout the whole series. And so I really quite enjoyed the whole series as a read, but there was a lot of group members. I read this with the Up to No Good book club, which is Jolene from Bookworm Adventure Girl, Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, AJ Dunn of AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, Sonja Devenney, and Deb from Deb at Johnson. She's the subscriber that I read all those nonfiction with. So we read the Wolf Hall series together. And this last book just really did seem to drag quite a bit. The last 100 pages really brought everything together, and I did love Mantel's artistry throughout the whole series, so I felt like it was quite worth it. But some readers that were already on the fence and having some mixed reviews about Mantel's writing from the start seemed to just not care for this book as much as I did. I really liked the whole series throughout. There's no rushing Mantel. Like, she's gonna tell the story in the way that she wants to tell the story, and she's gonna go at the pace that she wants to go at. And so, you know, with those first 600 pages, you really are just enjoying her writing and watching the story build, even though there's not a ton to grab onto as far as plot goes. I hope that makes sense. But overall, I really loved all 3 of her books, and this trilogy was fantastic. I really loved it, if you can't tell. Okay, observation number 5. I'm calling this Crushin Russian History. Basically, this is because I read the biography of Catherine the Great by Robert K. Massey. I finished that in December. I also read Kevin Birmingham's. This is one of my Booktube Prize books, so that I will not talk about it a ton, but I read The Sinner and the Saint. This is all about Dostoevsky and the process that he went through in order to write Crime and Punishment. And so there was a lot about Russian history, especially during the mid-1800s. And then in March, I'm going to be reading War and Peace. And so I feel like, well, there's a lot going on with Russia right now. I don't want to talk about it too much. All I know is that I was trying to watch something on Friday night. I was watching something that aired on Friday night, a news piece that aired on Friday night, and I was trying to watch it on Sunday evening, and the news was already old. So news is going really fast in Russia, and I didn't want to talk about crushing Russian history or Crushin Russian history without mentioning the situation going on with the Russians invading Ukraine. But having said that, I am learning more about Russia and their ideology and their history, and I think that that's really interesting. Though right now, as Russia's making history, it's that's just a whole different conversation that I did want to touch on and say that I am thinking about, but I don't really know what to say except for it's on my mind. Okay, concluding thoughts. I'm loving the Booktube Prize project. I like this sort of focused reading. I really want to read more of Hilary Mantel. Every single person that I've been on a second date with, so Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, and Virginia Woolf, I want to meet again for a third date. Our second date went very well, and I want to meet them again. And yeah, as far as historical fiction goes, I think that that's a genre that I'm going to be picking up more often. Am I eventually going to say historical fiction is my favorite? I don't know. Only time will tell, right? So I want to know if there has been any trends in your reading. I'd be very curious to know and to find out. Or if you did something similar to this and just started, looking at what have you been reading for the last 6 months, the last 2 months, the last 40 books, whatever, time frame that is. And do you see any trends in your reading? I would love to know. But that is it for me, kind of a odd, different style kind of check-in for my reading wrap-up in February. I hope you liked it. Let me know if you did. But that's it for me. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.